Believe it or not, I'm at Oak Creek. Yeah, alright. I'm at Oak Creek and I'm going to continue mobile tracking here. Same solo method as before. Seems to work pretty well. I guess one issue that I did notice is that I wish we had better, that the scanning was more accurate. I found last time that the comparing the places that I had scanned twice and doing them over again, with the new antenna, with the newly tuned antenna, I did get more tracers, but I didn't get all of the tracers that I got previously. So I'm going to need to work on that. Anyway, I'm at the turn this back to the rear camera. Here at this nail. This is the last tie-off point before where I stopped yesterday, so I'm here. I'm going to tighten the thread a little bit by wrapping it around the nail, and I've got the hip chain zeroed, so that 0 point is going to be here at the log, at this last tie-off. Got new gloves, so I won't have to be complaining about that. These are pigskin. And that tends to be the one I like for working in water. Alright, let's get going then. Oh jeez, I'm still right under the log and I ticked off half a meter just turning around. I'm not really satisfied with that. At least get off to a good start. Thread behind me. So I'm going to re-zero here. Still managed to pull off a meter. What the fuck? Oh, I'm back at 0. My phone fell into the creek. Kind of thing. Back at 0. Phone fell into the creek. Leader strapped sort of around the upright part of the camera thing in order to hold it tighter to me, and got it in front of me. Maybe my arms won't knock it then, or at least I'll see it and be able to avoid it. Therefore, also just not going to try much in the way of scanning right now until I get down to where I stopped last time. I think I've gotten things straightened out. Yeah, the antenna wasn't working. Must have somehow made the connection not good with the antenna, but it seems to be working now. Either the connection was bad or it was that the connector was wet because it got in the water. I don't know, maybe it just dried out. I undid some tape, redid some tape. I don't think I really did anything except probably just dried out. Well, anyhow, I don't know. So, point is that now it's working. We can get back to business. So I'm at the flag where last time I stopped, where the distance was 459.7 meters on that particular day. So there's a log jam here to get down. Not sure which way to go. It's looking pretty damn deep right here. So I'm thinking probably over that way. I'm trying to scan all this. Creek's really wide right here. I suppose I can note at this point that I am just at the bottom of the step where it was previously standing. So although some distance has been reeled off because I've gone around it, I'm not sure how to account for that in the data, but it worries me a little that I got that hit a while ago and then couldn't get it again. Get up here and check again, make sure I don't have an intermittent antenna connection. Keep the thread untangled here. It's a bit of a trick. Oh, thread snap. I'm going to go back over to the step and tie it there. And go back to 0. So zeroing, and that means we are right at that port 59.7 flag, or close enough anyway. Just the step, down the step from it, is tying to a piece of wood on top of the step. Check the functioning of the antenna. The antenna seems to be functioning. Run back and forth across this wide place in the channel downstream of the big log jam. Big gravel bar. Water at this point is confined to relatively narrow channel along one side and along the left bank, but wide bar here. There appears to be a fair number of tracers in it. Logs here. One thing I learned from looking back at other past mobile track, well, the last mobile tracking that made it this far anyway. Finding the nails. Here's the nail. So as soon as I ducked under this log, I'm at the nail now. At the nail. And like I was saying, I need to do a better job of looking out for them, because I mean, it's not super duper critical important, but it's important for making sure you're kind of on track as to where you are, in case your hip chain gets sort of tangled up somewhere. So again, as usual, I will tie off in a second. Tie it off. I'm going to keep the various straps on the backpack and etc. tucked away, because those folded ends are just really annoyingly, the thread will get lodged in those folded ends of straps. Alright, the lapse in time there was just to do some reconfiguring the hip chain, battery pack, and so on. Camera turned off and I lost about a meter. Luckily that's it. Well, not even a full meter. The creek looks like it's going through a root tunnel. So there's think that's the pond over there. There's a dam. Now I need to scan this bar up here. Scan this bar over here, and then work my way back over there. I think what I'm going to have to do is tie off to this nail and then backtrack into that tunnel, and just have to essentially consider the distance static for a bit. So at the nail right now, 61.0 at the nail. So I'm gonna break the chain, as it were. Alright, now I'm gonna backtrack. I'm holding the antenna up for now because I don't want to scan stuff again over here in a bit. I'll have a bit of a discussion of how I analyze these data and why backtracking can be a problem. I just hope that was a new tracer. I need to do something special in the data analysis. Back to the nail. Try to retie the thread without changing the distance. Left myself some slack for that reason. Before I do that, I crawl under this log here, get the other side of that bar, other side of the log. There's a tree slash log, the nail's on. You can see the flag there. There's a bar under there, and you know, hip chain. With the hip chain tied, it's always more of a hassle getting through places, because you always got to be mindful of the thread and not to get tangled in it. Alright, tied back to the thread. Tied. Past this beaver dam, or whatever it is. Big log jam. In front of the dam here. This other dam. Secondary dam. Hole under there. I can't get the antenna out. Okay. Still in front of the jam. I think I missed a whole lot there. Deep hole here. A deep pool and bar, and tracers have been in that. Seem to be pretty much in that bar. Looking up on a bridge across the creek, just a single log with a plank affixed to its top. And it's like chicken wire affixed to the plank to provide traction. Nice. And now at the bridge. Just a couple meters there, and really just because I wanted to get a little picture here of that bedrock outcropping here. Anyway, missed about 1.5 meters. Anyway, in a little constrained bit of the channel here. I want to talk a bit about how I break down these data back in the lab. Once I get back to the office, I upload the video from my camera to my computer, and of course upload the logger file also to the computer. So once I've got the logger file on the computer, it's a text file. I open it in Excel. I do text to columns. and then I insert a column for time, and I insert a column for ID number. So that is, column for time is the sum of the time of first detection, which is reported on the line in the logger file, plus the duration of that detection event. That way I've got the time of the first detection on the line, and I've also got the time of the last detection on the line. I insert a column for ID number. That is, I use the Excel command write cell equals right of the previous cell, which is the unadulterated RFID, and I grab the last 6 digits of it, because that's all we need. Then I copy those 6 digits as values back into the same column and convert them to numbers. Because by default it stores them as text. Then I sort. Alright, so now I've got the usual stuff that the data logger spits out, plus a time of last detection and the stripped 6-digit RFID number. So then I do a sort on that according to the time of last detection, but I do that sort with descending time. That is, flip the order of the rows. Last becomes first. And then what I do, so I've sorted all of the rows according to descending time, so last is first. And then I do a filter. What is it? I think it's the option for like advanced filter. And all I do there is I say, okay, I just want them back in the same spot. I don't want to copy them to a different location. And I say I want unique values only. And so then that gives me a set of rows where the duplicates are hidden, and all I've got is ID numbers. Well, because typically the IDs will appear several times in the list as we're swinging walking back and forth across the channel. We'll pick the tag up more than once. So aside from simply some duration of detection that's finite, there's more than one event. So what I've got at that point is just all the last detection events with times at the beginning of those events and times at the end of those events. So then I take the times of the ends of the events and the ID numbers, and I just take those columns and I copy them into a separate sheet. So now I don't have the weird sort of filter artifact of the apparently missing rows. I've just got sequential rows. And I'm down to, say, 2 columns. And then I sort those rows again, this time with ascending time. Now, note that I'm not doing a log that spans more than 1 day. Therefore, I can use just the clock time. And I don't have to include the date in order to do that sorting. So if you were trying to do this on a set of data on a log that covered more than 1 day, you'd have to include the date. So easier just to keep one log file per day for this mobile tracking. Alright, so at that point I may need to do a time correction while I try to sync up the times at the beginning of each day, other than the second time I did this. So I sync the time on the logger to the time on my phone / camera. But it might not be perfect. I mean, when I sync it, I have to flip over to the clock, count down with it to 10, 9, and then flip while I'm counting down to 0. I flip back over to the terminal application on my phone, and I've already typed in the date and time at the top of the minute, that is the 0 seconds time. And when I reach 0 in my countdown, I hit enter to set the time. So I could be off. Maybe there's a bit of lag in between when I hit enter and when the command is actually executed in the logger, or maybe I'm off by a fraction of a second. At the end of the day, I could be a couple seconds off, and that can make a difference if I'm making good time up the channel. You can cover a couple meters in a couple seconds. So at the end of the day today, I will figure out exactly how much the clock on the reader is off from the clock on my phone, and then I'll add in an offset. And so I'll insert a new time column. That'll be the so-called real time, and simply add those. Typically the logger might be slow a couple seconds, who knows. I'll add that couple seconds to the logger time to get it back to the phone time. And then turns out to be kind of important at that point to hide the time that I'm not going to be referring to, because now the time, so-called real time, should correspond exactly, down to the second at least, to the timestamp on this video. So then I load all the video files, and maybe photos as well, if there are those. Sometimes there are some still photos. I load those into iMovie, which isn't the best, certainly not the best video editing program, but it's been working okay for my purposes. So once I've got all those in there, I can simply slide up and down all the whole day, or even multiple days I can put in there in the one video. I can just slide backward and forward in time with the swipe on my touchpad. I do this on my desktop computer. My laptop doesn't handle this kind of thing very well. But I've got 32 gigs of RAM on my desktop. Well, that Mac is over 10 years old. It's still generally doing pretty well at least in terms of RAM. That's not to say that it always works without a hiccup. Then I've got my spreadsheet open next to my iMovie window, and I can just read down the list of detection events. Okay, all those beeps, that's going to be, all detections probably for a single tracer, right? But it's down to one row per tracer, and the last time at which it was detected. Now, why the last time? Well, when we're deploying the tracers, that is when we're putting them into the stream, practice is essentially You know, so for example, when we were deploying the last batch of tracers, we had our research assistants, undergrad Sophia, with the hip chain sort of taking up the rear with the field book, and the rest of us would be in front of her, you know, so we don't screw up the hip chain, and we'd be scanning in the tracers and essentially tossing them at her feet, and then she'd record that distance from the hip chain manually, and she'd also have the tablet computer open and actually writing down the numbers by hand, which, by the way, does introduce an element of error. I found it important to go back and go by the actual data, because sometimes, you know, not often, she was good. Got a bridge here. And I'm right at the leading edge of it right now, and right now I'm directly underneath it in the middle of the channel. Now, typically when we were doing mobile tracking in prior years with at least 2 people, we would again log all the numbers by hand in the field notebook, because that's essentially the only way to, at least the simplest way that we had to associate the numbers with distances. But as we were going and logging and writing those numbers in the book, we would write it down the first time it was detected, and typically then write the hip chain distance at that point. Now, let's look for a second here. And let's look for a second at this antenna. It is that big, and I'm holding it in front of me. Now, I haven't always been holding it this way in front of me, sometimes this way, but as I crisscross the channel, I figure I'm going to get better overlap this way. So that means that the first time I detect one of these tracers, it's going to be typically like, geez, what is that, 1.5 meters? I don't know. Let's see. I'll put that next to my foot. Comes up to my waist. In other words, the first detection is going to be in front of me. However, the last detection will be typically more right at my feet. So it's my feet that the hip chain is attached to. So that's why I want to use that last time. There's some, you know, pretty serious limitations to the precision that we have with the hip chain. However, you know, it doesn't mean it's impossible to get down to meters of distance, at least where we've got frequent nails for tying off. If, say, our hip chain is 100% accurate, then, you know, using that last detection is simply going to be more accurate numbers. That is, we wouldn't register a tracer as having moved 1 or 2 meters when it hadn't. So that's the idea. Okay. So I've got all those. So that's why the whole issue of, you know, reverse sorting the rows in reverse chronological order if we're doing the filter to get unique values, because the filter for unique always grabs the first row of that occurrence. So then I've got my iMovie with all the video files all in one project next to my list of IDs and times, and then I simply go down the list, and with a swipe I can scroll right to the second of that time in the sequence of videos. And so that at that point I record the distance at that time as recorded, you know, in this video by this camera. Record that distance by hand in the spreadsheet. Now if the camera's turned off, let's say, and I've missed some distances, well, then I just gotta interpolate the best I can, because I will have, I'll have the video, it'll pick back up again. I've had the camera go off and miss, more than just a couple of meters, sometimes as much as, I don't know, I think I missed as much as 10 meters at some point. So I haven't even quite decided what to do with that yet, whether to, that particular case, I know exactly where it is, and it's right next to where our reader is, and so our fixed reader. So I could just go back and redo that. On the other hand, the part that I missed with the video was in the restricted reach. So I don't really want to go back in there. So I'll probably just interpolate the best I can. That is, I know the distance at some time, I know the distance at another time, and all the distances in between I can just relate linearly to the, do a linear interpolation. I mean, all the times in between. I've got the times in between, I've got distances that are missing, but I've got the beginning and ending distance, so I can just do a linear interpolation. I think that will probably suffice. One thing I've heard that people do with tracers, gravel and tracer gravel, is they'll actually try to make sure when they relocate, they will seriously relocate, and they will find exactly where, to the point, so they'll actually put the end of a reflector rod on that rock and use a total station to survey its position, sort of sub-centimeter accuracy then. And golly, that sounds like a lot of work. One of the big differences between this study and others previous is simply the number of tracers we've used. We've at this point we've put something like 2,600 tracers into Oak Creek. So even if so it's already tricky business finding the tracers at all with mobile antenna, and this antenna is pretty big, so now I can lean it up and down and figure out more or less, a little more precisely where the pieces that I'm detecting. But still, most of the time, hardly ever do I actually see these tracers. This year's tracers have white spots on them, but so do a lot of the pieces of gravel in this creek. And previous years, previous tracers had that dark gray epoxy, so the tracers are really hard to distinguish. They don't stand out at all. They are the original creek rock. So, in order to find them again, we require, and we've played around with this, we have an on-off switch for this mobile reader that we've installed, so we don't have to, I can turn it off without opening up the case for the reader using the physical switch on the board. I've got another switch, which is, both good and bad. The switch resulted in me, before I taped it down, that switch resulted in me having that reader turned off accidentally. So anyway, and we've also got our antennas plug in to the end of to a plug on the wire that's outside the backpack. So long story short, I am actually carrying a small antenna. I could plug that antenna in, switch off the reader, because you don't want to run the reader without an antenna hooked up to it. It doesn't immediately fry it, but it will. Running the reader without an antenna connected will not immediately fry it, but it will wear out the device on the board that essentially shunts the voltage that would be going to the antenna. There's essentially a spark gap device on the board, and you can actually hear it if you open up the reader and it's on while it's on and there's no antenna hooked up. You can actually hear the sparks on the spark gap device. And I'm kind of guessing at this point, but not recommended to operate the reader without an antenna hooked up. So that spark gap device, I would imagine, has a finite lifetime in terms of quick sparks. Each spark might burn away a little bit of the electrode, and then over time the gap will widen and the spark gap device will become less effective. I don't know enough about the details of the electronics to say why there's an issue. I just know that there does seem to be, and there's a device, you can hear it going off. It's not loud, it's like a little clicking sound, very faint clicking sound when there's no antenna hooked up. Oh, and I'm at a nail, in fact. Right here, I'm sitting on the log. that the nail is connected to. So 222.0. Alright, and tie it off, and back to where the thread is taut. So, long story short, we could, if we put in a smaller antenna, then we can locate a tracer more precisely. So we thought of that, okay, if we want to actually locate very precisely where the tracer is, we can switch out the big antenna for small antenna and so on, and narrow it down that way. But to me, like I said before, when we put the tracers in, I was literally tossing them at Sophia's feet, literally pegging, often pegging her in the boot with the tracer that I tossed, and then it would fall at her feet. But if we're not placing them, well, I suppose if we're not placing them precisely, then there's really no point in locating them that precisely. That said, that means we have to figure out what to do with, when we're looking at, say, travel distances with the mobile antenna. According to mobile tracking, our travel distances can and have been negative. Not that our tracers move upstream, but the accuracy, because the precision of our distance measurements is not so great, then some of those are going to come out negative. Generally, we are simply recording location with the hip chain, so we're just doing one dimension, distance downstream. My goodness, the thought of plugging a total station over these sorts of distances. Now, we've thought of using GPS, of getting an accurate, say, mapping grade or even survey grade GPS. Those are wicked expensive, and those GPS units are pretty expensive, and I don't have a lot of faith that the GPS is going to work down in the creek very well. It's one thing to have a GPS unit that says that you can get, say, sub-meter, even down to sub-decimeter accuracy with 180, with a half sphere of sky and adequate satellite coverage and all that. But in a mountain stream, you're typically in a valley, and here in the Pacific Northwest, you're under canopy. So, you're going to get generally we get decent enough GPS, but I've had bad experiences with GPS and learned that I couldn't rely on it. Specifically back in 2006, we were doing field work in the Coast Range, and we were mapping channel substrate, attempting to use a mapping grade GPS. So this is a thing where we had to carry around some relatively heavy sort of VCR or video camera type batteries, and the little backpack thing had a little pole on top of it with a disc-shaped antenna on top of the little pole. So this was a pain in the butt to carry around, and especially navigating these mountains, these Pacific Northwest and Coast Range streams where you're fighting your way through vegetation and dealing with woody debris and all that. I mean, hell, if you're listening to this now, you heard me griping and groaning plenty getting around with this unit here. So, well, anyway, that summer, at the beginning of the summer, it seemed like we were doing pretty well with our GPS. May have some distances a bit off. The thread was sort of wedged under my hip belt. So the beginning of the summer, we were doing pretty well. We would try to be realistic, where we would try to get high accuracy GPS location. Okay, I think we can probably do it here. But, that said, we did have to be realistic. We often, at the beginning of the summer, we would have issues with getting enough antennas, and it's likely that the locations that we were getting had limited accuracy due to the canopy that we might have been under. But at some point that summer, it just became really difficult to get enough satellites to get any kind of GPS location. And this is speculation on my part. What I've heard is my understanding. I think it's true that the military can move the satellites around to some limited degree. I mean, obviously they're orbiting the Earth, and they're not in geostationary orbits. But I do believe they can, I've heard, I don't know for sure this is true, I've heard that they can manipulate their positions, and when there is some theater of combat that requires they have really good GPS locations, really reliable, then they will, and the rest of the world will not have as good a coverage. This is 2006. What changed at some point during the summer of 2006? Israel invaded southern Lebanon that summer. You may say this sounds like a wild-eyed conspiracy. I would say, well, no, I mean, if the military can, again, I don't know this for a fact, I'd have to look into it, probably I should, but provided the military can task satellites to war, theaters of war, then, well, Israel is a close military and otherwise ally of the U.S. It's not a stretch to imagine that somebody in the IDF would make a call and say, we're going to be having some operations. They might not even have to tell them exactly what they're going to do, you know. Say, we'd really appreciate it if the U.S. could sort of optimize the satellite coverage over southern Lebanon for the next couple months. Whether we stopped being able to get GPS points because of Israel's invasion of Lebanon or not, I don't know. But we did just, at some point, we were just not able to use the GPS reliably, and essentially just stopped using it altogether in favor of simply recording distances with the hip chain. You know, it's pretty damn reliable. It's not super duper accurate, but it's generally about as accurate as we need it to be for that kind of mapping, and for this as well. So at this point, I'm hundreds of meters downstream of where we deployed these tracers, and so in particular getting measurements of their distance from their original deployment location, hip chain accuracy is just fine. Now, it's true that I was looking at the various mobile tracking logs last night and noticed that there was a tracer near where I finished up last time, near that log jam, upstream of that log jam, that was in approximately the same location in July 2017. So has that tracer moved? If it's moved 10 meters, I might be able to get a decent estimate of its. If it's moved more than 10 meters, then I could maybe get a decent measurement of its distance traveled since 2017, but realistically, it probably hasn't moved that much. It probably hasn't moved at all. And so I'm going to have some, when I compare the numbers, there will be some non-zero difference. It might be negative, it might be positive. Alright, this is getting kind of shitty. It's starting to rain. I have to make a decision about whether I want to stay dry. It's raining a bit. It's not so warm that I'm not worried at all about getting cold, so I got out my rain gear. It occurred to me to give a shout out to Arc'teryx for sending me this new jacket. Now, they're not like a sponsor of mine. No, if you've watched a bunch of my videos, maybe two of you, one of you, I don't know. And it's in inclement weather, you'll have noticed that I'm always wearing an Arc'teryx jacket, and that there's been a couple of them. Well, in my more recent videos have been my old Arc'teryx jacket that I replaced a few years ago. A green one that was in some of the earlier videos, and the hem of it became frayed, and I sent it back, and they sent me this, well, they gave me credit to purchase this new one. So, Beta AR, Arc'teryx Beta AR jacket. Black this time instead of lime green or bright green, which I kind of like better anyway. Thanks, guys and gals. Alright, after a short break for rain, I originally put on my jacket for a bit, and somehow got zoomed in. Alright, so I'm back in all my harnesses and whatnot, and I'm going to break for a sec here again to see where the hip chain was, how much might have been pulled out. It looks like it was at 268.2 before, now it's at 270.6, and I think that's all just, what happens when you try to take off a hip chain without doing anything else. So I'd have to adjust by adding some or just subtracting some distance from these. Hopefully there's going to be a nail at some point. I haven't seen any. Maybe I haven't been looking well enough. I am directly underneath the nail right now. Tie it off. I knew I was going to be going along next to people's potentially private property today. I tried to muffle the beeper thingy, wrapped a rag around it with electrical tape. Doesn't seem to have made much of a difference. No, not the nail. Tied off to the nail. Coming up on a big gravel bar. Oh, so 2 gravel bars. Alright, let's show it. Look at this tree here. Just noting it because I want to make sure it's the kind of thing John would put a nail on. The size of the gravel on this bar seems a bit remarkable. Surprised how big it is. Some of it, especially over on the right bank side, it's cobbly. All this gravel and no tracers. Makes me suspect that this cobbly stuff has a local source, or cobbly stuff stops here but smaller stuff doesn't, and all of our tracers that have made it this far are small and therefore haven't stopped here. Reader battery's getting pretty low. I'm up on a log jam. I'm hoping there's a nail there to give me a good place to stop. I'm worried about what I'm doing to this battery. It's a barbed wire fence. That is in the previous notes and its location, so that will be my place to stop. Right now I'm at the barbed wire fence. So this is the barbed wire fence, and I flagged it at 394.1 meters. Never hurts to throw in some things that might make people tend to have a charitable view of my flagging, not tear it down, not get too pissed off that I'm treading around all over the place like I own it. Well, I got a ways to go. I gotta go back the way I came. Cheers. Alright, I tied off to the barbed wire fence without changing the reading on the hip chain, without zeroing it. Very wide spot. I'm going to take off the hip chain and leave it here while I go scan this backwater to my left. Just wanted to check the reader, make sure it's still on. Coming up on a wood jam with a big bar backed up behind it. It's not, doesn't cover, well, doesn't really dam the whole channel, so, but a big bar. Channel widens here. Haven't seen tie-off point this whole time. Doesn't seem right, but I probably missed him. Got a couple meters past the log drop for that log jam. And I didn't find any tracers in that big bar or even in the channel just upstream of it that I did in the pool. And now, just downstream of the jam. Coming up on a log jam. Kind of thing I would expect to have a tie-off nail. Just behind the jam, the flow goes pretty much under it. It's not, doesn't appear to be damming the flow much, if any. I'm going to find a tie-off. I'm on top of the jam. There's a big tree rooted at the downstream side of it. So I'm even with the trunk of that tree right now. Still don't see a tie-off. Incidentally, I have been, during this whole process, trying to keep note of when I'm on bedrock and when I'm not, or when I am on bedrock. So my lack of comment about bedrock today is because I have not seen any. Ooh. So that's right under the jam, reaching back. So that's right at about where I said that I was on top of the jam, even with the tree. Anyway, like I was saying, haven't seen bedrock today. So the channel is pretty narrow here. And there's a bit of bar, a little bar on the left bank here. I don't know. Could just be a bank material bar. I don't know. Let's just say, oh, well there, that's on that bar. I'm kind of going to have to just hope that where the water's going here, that no tracers have stopped. There's a water stream kind of goes under a clump of willows here, and it's not. There's a bar to the left side of me. Seems probably more important to get that and sort of the periphery of the pool on that left side of this jam. And works its way through some bars here. One bar on the big bar on the right bank, two mid-channel bars towards the left. This is a bit of a barrier here. logs and trees and such. This is kind of gonna suck. I only made it through this friggin' mess. Good God. That was a pain in the ass. Anyway, I'm getting some detections right here in the downstream end, so just get everything in gear here. I had to take off the hip chain and push it, pass it through, put it on, took it off, put it on a log, crawled under the log, got it, reached back for it, and just kind of carried it through till this point with the antenna. Didn't get any detections till just now, so here we go. Oh, coming up on a tie-off, oh my God. It's getting so lonesome without them. This one's in a tree on the right bank. It kind of sticks into the flow a little bit. It's maybe a bit undermined. I don't know, maybe not. Never mind. Okay, I am right here, even with the nail. Even with the nail here. I'm going to tie it off now. Okay, tied off. A big jam and a bar behind it. And it's hard to tell exactly, but it looks like the stream just hits the jam and seeps through. So probably going to have to go over this way. Yeah, I'm just not going to be able to get the antenna under that jam. Climbing onto the end of a log that doesn't quite want to hold my weight. I'm going to stop this to get a waypoint. Get it back down the bank into the channel. And past the jam now. Still kind of on the bank. Trying to reach under the jam a little. Oh, by the way, I discovered that there is actually a nail in the downstream end of that big log jam. I guess this is zeroed at. It was hard to see first, or maybe not too hard, it just didn't have much flagging on it. So this isn't bedrock, but you can see the indurated stuff acting like bedrock. See if I can figure out where that tracer is. It looks like it might be in this, tangled up in these roots. So I've been seeing flags, white flagging. I don't know what it is. Up ahead there is a tree with orange flagging tied around it. And white flagging tied to the orange flagging. Just past the tree. Something in the creek. Piece of pipe sticking out of the bed. I don't know. Could be somebody's science gear. And there it is. Makes sense if it were right next to the flagged tree. The bridge is in sight, and so is a tie-off nail. And I'm even with the nail right now. 693.5. Tie off. Okay. Tied off. So this is the nail just upstream of the last bridge. Last road bridge, or first road bridge in this direction. That's where, if you're driving out here, you make that last right turn to stay on Oak Creek Drive. Got a waypoint up here in a bit. Okay. I'm going to stop this to get a waypoint. Alright, I'm almost to the bridge. Yeah, right here I'm at the upstream edge of the bridge in the middle of the channel. Pretty nice how there's no vegetation or anything in the way down here under the bridge. Here I am right at the downstream edge of the bridge in the center of the channel. Big leaf maple here with partly hollow and big fungi in it. Yeah, almost to another tie-off nail. Okay, even with the nail right now. Okay, gonna step back and tie off. Alright, we're tied off. Channel's very narrow here. It's pinned on one side by this indurated material, and the other side is riprap. I guess there is still some gravel deposit. Well, okay, the channel's widening out right here a bit. Check the battery. Appears to be okay for now. 17.9 volts. Getting on the low side, so I brought two batteries, so I'm good. I'm not gonna change it just yet, though. Very narrow between rooty banks here. Rubble in the channel. Big pieces of broken concrete. Now widening out before getting pinched again by between two trees. And one of the trees that pinches the channel has a nail. Right there where the flagging is. These trees are way undercut. Looks like they've got roots that go way under the bank. Otherwise, there's no way they'd still be standing. Okay, even with the nail here. I'm gonna tie off. Alright, tied off. Channel continues to be very narrow through here, past the pinching trees. Big old cedar on the bank. Red cedar. Fuja plicata. Channel widens out just a bit here. There's a riffle ahead. There's a bar here. This might be a good place to switch out the batteries. Alright, batteries changed out. Fresh battery in the reader. I said fresh battery in the reader. Right. Fresh battery hooked up to the reader. Alright, continuing. Had to make a phone call. I gotta be careful of this phone. The bracket fell off. It got ripped off beginning of the day before I started logging at the log jam, and amazingly I fell into the water in the deep pool at the downstream, just the plunge pool down from the log jam. Looked for a while, went back upstream, looked there, came back down, sort of scooted down, and then reached down to where, near where my feet were, and when I jumped and found it. Because otherwise I would be not really able to do this today. That was just a bunch of things that just seemed to go wrong this morning. Not dramatically wrong, just delay. Anyway, just now I had to make a phone call. Luckily, I'm just barely able to. Approaching a nail. Okay, even with the nail. Get my head through these freaking thorns. Oof. Ow! God damn. Fucking hell. Ah! Man, it was a fail. Jesus Christ, these fucking bastard things. Yeah, tied off. I'm gonna pause here to get a waypoint. There's the tree with see the flag dangling there. A bunch of relatively fine gravel here. Hoping to get off my knees sometime soon. Channel widens out here. About to cross under the power lines. I'm coming up on something on that. I guess it's a bridge. But not the sort of bridge. No. It's not a regular highway bridge, that's for sure. Not a road bridge. It's very narrow, wooden. Footbridge. A rotten footbridge. And under the center of the bridge. It's a 0.8 fine sand and gravel bar here. Not a big bar, but a bar. I say fine sand and gravel, I meant sand and fine gravel. I'm directly beneath the center wire, the center of the 3 high tension wires. I believe this is the so-called sheep farm reach of Oak Creek. Just a nice line of alders right along the bank. The left bank is pretty line of alders. The right bank is this heinous hedge of blackberry. The blackberries are overhanging the channel a bit. Luckily not too awfully much. There's a bar along the left bank, but beginning to think it may be local material. At least I'm not finding any tracers in it. There's some a long way, so. Oh my. So, some boulders in the channel right here. That's where the tracers are. Tracers. So that was 2 tracers. I don't know what size they were, because what I did just now is look at the there's a screenshot showing the tracers. Channel's pretty narrow here. It's moving pretty quickly at this point. Narrow and not ridiculously obstructed by crap. Approaching a second set of power lines, not high tension lines, normal power lines. And just ahead there is a riffle, and then right where the power lines go over, there's a fence across the channel. Kind of expected to find some tracers on this bar. Nope. Well, there we go. A tree down across the channel, then cut into some. Okay. Underneath the power lines, almost up to the fence. Looks like my best bet is to go around on the right side. Right up against the fence here. And get over past the fence. Need to scan along the fence here. It's going to draw out thread. So this is just in front of the fence still. Coming up on a nail. Probably better stop there because one thing, it's getting dark, and another thing, I'm almost out of thread. I'm at the nail. Alright, well, I'm past the nail. I'm going to go ahead and tie off on it and try to figure out how to get out of here. Ash tree. And now I'm entangled. I'm tied off. Let's just get Phil. Okay, slacks out of it now. I'm thinking I might be able to get out through there. Depends on if there's blackberries behind what I see. Wish me luck. Let's take a look around. There's the nail tree. View upstream. View downstream. Wall of blackberries on the left bank. Bye-bye.